What's up, guys? It's Sam. I'm going to do a quick tutorial on a crackle recipe that I found. I remember when I first was searching for a good one on YouTube, I had a hard time finding one that I liked that I could get to work personally. And I also had a viewer recently comment asking about a crackle recipe, so there you go. All right, so here's the formula we're going to be working with. A guy who came up with its name's Lloyd Spinell. He's been in the pyrotechnic industry for some decades. Super knowledgeable guy. He's helped me out a few times on over on fireworking.com, hosted by Ned Gorski. If you guys never checked out that website, it's well worth the membership fee. I can't remember exactly what it is, like $50 a year or something. Really good community they got over there. So the main ingredient is bismuth trioxide. I'm going to do a 100-gram batch just to keep the numbers easy for the video's sake. So 71% bismuth trioxide, that's 71 grams. You got 14% black copper oxide, so that's 14 grams. 10% magnesium minus 200 mesh, so that's 10 grams. And we have atomized aluminum spherical, 5%, so that is 5 grams. And once that's all nice and intimately mixed, the recipe calls for NC lacquer as a binder. Lloyd's actual recipe calls for homemade NC lacquer with green dot smokeless powder, but I don't have any of that on hand. So last couple times I made this crackle, this NC lacquer's worked pretty good. I'll cover that more when we get to that point. I also want to mention that the mesh sizes on your metals are important. Really all compositions, but especially on crackle. Different mesh sizes of especially the magnesium changes the effect considerably. And minus 200 is what works best for this specific formula. All right, so I'll start by adding everything to a bowl, just like you would any other composition. You guys don't need to explain that part. I'll note that it probably wouldn't hurt to wear a dust mask while you're doing this stuff, man. You don't want to breathe the metals and metal oxides in. It's not good for you. Before I screen compositions, I like to stir it up a little bit. I like to avoid shaking anything when I can, especially compositions with metal in it. Stirring with a wooden dowel. Anything with metal in it, I usually don't run through my good screens, and especially amount this small. I'm just gonna use a little small kitchen colander. Crackle can be kind of sensitive to impact and friction, so don't throw it around. Be gentle with it. I'm going to screen it 3 or 4 times, but it's going to be really wet after we add the NC lacquer to it, so it's not the end of the world if it's not completely and perfectly mixed at this step. All right, so our composition's mixed up real thoroughly and intimately. So the next step is to add the NC lacquer. As I stated before, the original recipe calls for homemade NC lacquer with green dot smokeless powder. I haven't been able to get my hands on a jug of green dot yet, and then plus I already had this stuff on hand, so I'm trying to use it up. Um, so there's a specific amount the recipe calls for, um, but I don't know exactly what percentage of nitrocellulose this batch of lacquer is, so I've just kind of been eyeballing it. Um, I'm going to add a lot of lacquer. It's going to look like way too much, but there's a reason for that. Um, you need more nitrocellulose in your composition than the acetone that it's dissolved in can hold. So you have to put an excess of liquid into your composition and let the acetone evaporate and leave the excess nitrocellulose behind, if that makes any sense. Um, so I kind of eyeball it with this particular lacquer. Um, and it's worked for me thus far. You're just going to have to use um, your own judgment a little bit more. Mix that up, see how it looks. Like I said, it's going to look way too wet. But the point is to get that extra nitrocellulose in there. That's why I made the comment of it not being the end of the world to not have it screened 100% thoroughly, because this step here, everything's getting mixed as well as it's going to. I'm just going to stir that around for a few minutes. I mean, at this point, the next step is to just let it evaporate for however long it takes. I mean, this much acetone is going to take at least a few hours in a well ventilated area with air moving to evaporate to the point. So you just want to let it. You don't want it to evaporate to dry, but just to a workable point where you can kind of roll it in a ball. Because the next step is to flatten it out and push it through an 8 mesh screen, and then let it dry a little bit more before moving on to the next step. So I'm gonna set this somewhere to dry, and I will touch base with you guys when it's done. All right, so our crackle's dry enough to get into a workable putty. So the next step is to first get it into the gather up all the composition in the bowl here. If parts of it are too dry, what you can do is just spray it, mist it with some just regular acetone. Get it from the paint section, any hardware store, Home Depot, even Walmart. It's about the consistency we're looking for. I'll flatten it out like a patty. If this were any bigger, I would get a rolling pin out and do it that way. Let's stay together here. All right. I got my 8 mesh screen here, and I'm gonna try to keep that patty as flat as possible. Easier said than done. And I'm just gonna gently push it through like that. If you're familiar with screen slicing stars, this is pretty much the same thing we're doing here. once you get the majority of it pushed through, you can go back through and give it a firm push through. The goal is to try to push through as many intact stars as we can. We're going to get a lot of dust, but we can reclaim that and re-wet it with acetone if we want to, and then re-putty it, or we can use it in crackling fountains or comets or so there's our first version of our stars here. The next step is to let those dry a little bit longer, and I will check back with you guys. All right, so I came back, and it's probably been 20-25 minutes since I screened them the first time, and it's hard to get an idea on camera how much moisture they lost, but they're not dry, but they firmed up quite a bit. Yeah, sometimes whenever we're doing this stuff, man, we got to kind of change plan and adjust as we go. Normally, I would push these through the exact same screen one more time just to kind of give them the shape that I'm looking for. But these actually turned out really good on the first screening, so I think I'm going to omit that second screening. If you do it and you get like long noodle-like looking stars and or big like square misshapen oblong stars, you just repeat the first screening again. Just dump your stars out on the same exact screen you pushed them through the first time, and gently push them through, just trying to help them keep their shape and kind of round off those edges and make them pretty. Like I said, these turned out good. I don't want to mess them up by screening them a second time. So what we're going to do is just let these dry all the way, and then we're going to finish them off with some prime and set some off. All right, so I walked away from this for a few hours, left it out in open air with good ventilation, air moving. So it's thoroughly dry. So now it's time to re-wet it and coat it with some prime. If you guys have ever tried making crackle before and had a hard time getting it to successfully light, that's normal. Crackle's really, at least in my experience, crackle's really hard to get lit sometimes for whatever reason. So we need to use a really hot burning prime. I've used this monocapa prime in the past. I'll leave the formula for that in the description if you guys want to use the same thing. Any hot igniter prime should work. But I actually added a little bit of 2 or 3% extra of silicone metal powder to this. That is supposed to help it burn hotter. So we're just gonna dampen our stars a little bit with the same solvent. Rule of thumb, from what I've been told, is use the same solvent that you use to make your stars to prime it. So in this instance, we're using acetone. Don't soak the stuff, but get it damp. Put a good layer on there, toss it a little bit. Don't want to overdo it, just get a good, maybe 16th, not even a 16th, maybe a 32nd of an inch layer. And then once everything's thoroughly coated with the prime, we're going to take some black powder, just regular old standard black powder, and finish off with that. And after we're done with the priming step, it's good to separate the excess prime that's in the bottom of your bowl. Break up those clumps in the bottom. Really shouldn't need any more prime. There's enough in the bowl. So give me a second and I'll be back with some black powder. So we have our crackle thoroughly coated with the prime. Now it's time to just dust it with some black powder to make sure it ignites easily. This is just regular meal powder, freshly milled black powder, hot. Hey, we ain't got to get crazy with it. And don't worry if you got a little bit of excess down at the bottom. We're going to strain that out. Then we go to dry our crackle. And it's looking good. Really all we got to do now is just spread it out back on the paper, let it dry. Not before separating the excess prime and black powder in the bottom of the bowl, obviously. But once our stars are dry, they're good to go. We have some hopefully successful crackle. All right, guys, after all this time, I think our crackle's finally dry enough. All there's left to do is put it in a tube and see if it works. Crackle works best to my knowledge, works best unconfined. I mean, loosely packed. If you're looking for just like a firecracker type deal, you can do different things with crackle, like comets and fountains and stuff like that. I'll go over that in a different video. But from what I do, I just loosely pack it in the tube. I don't like compress it or anything. If you got any prime left over, wouldn't hurt to just throw a touch of prime in there. This is just what I sifted out of the mixture before I let it dry. Not much, just enough. We want, like I said, crackle's hard to light, so we just want to make sure we get good ignition. It's about 3/4 of the way full, if you guys can see that. Like I said, we don't want to pack it in there real tight, so I'm just going to poke a hole in a disc here. I can avoid stabbing myself poking the hole. Pop a fuse through the hole. Then we're just going to slide the disc down a little bit. I'm going to top that off with just another little pinch of BP and prime. And I'm just going to
slide that disc in there. I was hoping that would fit a little bit better. It's all right though. So I'm gonna fire this off right away. If you plan on making a bunch of these up and letting them sit for any amount of time, I don't see any reason you couldn't just put a little dab of hot glue, kind of loosely tack it up right here. Okay, now it's gonna stay, it looks like. But anyway, just loosely glue that disc or however you close off your cracker, and it should be good for storage. I'm gonna give it a loose little shake just to mix up that prime in there. And yeah, we're ready to go. Fire this bad boy off. If you guys made it this far in the video, I appreciate you watching. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you try to copy this process and have any problems, please feel free to reach out to me, and if I can help you, I gladly will. Yeah, we're going to go outside and test it. Once again, thanks for watching, guys. All right, time to see if our crackle works.